Hello, my name is Catherine Chow, and on behalf of the Alliance of Asian American Baptist Churches, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this presentation today by Dr. Russell Jeung. I want to introduce to you the group that has been working on the Wholeness and Reconciliation Project. We have two coordinators, Reverend Amelia Chua and Reverend Katie Choi Wong, and along with David Sun Lin and Nong Lazum, we have been working very hard to bring these presentations to you. This is the first in a series of presentations on wholeness and reconciliation put on by the Alliance. This series is presented as the first track of three in an anti-Asian American racism. And the original audience is American Baptist Burmese churches in Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. This work is made possible by a Palmer grant from the American Baptist Home Mission Society. And I'd like to now introduce Dr. Russell Jeung. He is an Asian American Studies professor at San Francisco State University. He's been there since 2002. He's the published author of quite a few books, and most recently, he is the key co-founder of StopAPIHate, the winner of the 2021 Webby Award for the Social Movement of the Year for 2021. Here's Russell Jeung.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here. It's really an honor, and I see a lot of familiar faces and old friends from Oakland, and send our greetings from New Hope Covenant Church in Oakland, where we work with a lot of Karen families too. And again, I have two daughters from the Chin State, and they send their greetings as well. This is a really difficult time for me and for the broader Asian community. As you know, we've had the shootings this week, and we've had seen so many Asian American elderly pushed and shoved and killed across the country. And so it's been really distressing. I get really angry and I'm outraged. And when I've heard how you guys shared about your own experience of discrimination, both in Burma and here, I think you understand firsthand how painful it is and how difficult it is to be mistreated simply by the way you look, or by what religion you belong to, or by your gender. And I know from my daughters, they talked about their churches being burned down in Burma. And so we know firsthand how there doesn't seem to be much justice in Burma and even in the United States. And so I want to talk about it and sort of understand how these dynamics play out and work in the United States, and maybe at the end, how we as Christians could deal with it, working with Jesus. So as Catherine said, I started this group called StopAAPIHate, and we began to track the racism that Asian Americans were experiencing during COVID-19. We knew that when epidemics came from Asia in the past, Asians faced violence and scapegoating for those diseases. And they also suffered from a lot of institutional policies. So let me share with you what we've been learning. So I know, as you told your stories, for a lot of us, the issue is when we experience discrimination, racism, we sort of wonder, are we really accepted here, right? Are you accepted here in Burma? Are you accepted in the United States? And can you really feel at home? And my family's been in the United States for 6 generations now. And my great-great-grandparents came from China to the US. And even though we've been here so long and I have deep roots in California, in San Francisco, now in Oakland, I don't really feel like I belong because of the way I look, because of I'm a minority in the US, and because of the way that we're being treated now. And so I'm going to want you to keep on thinking about this idea of belonging and wanting a home, and whether we're accepted and whether we fit in. So keep on thinking about your sense of belonging and what makes you feel like you could be at ease and be free to be yourself and know you fit in with your family or with your church, or the times when you feel ill at ease. These are some stories of the that we're receiving at StopAPIHate through our website. And these are all elderly people. So you don't think of Asian grandmas and grandpas going online and complaining or standing up to their discrimination, but they are, because they feel really mistreated and they want to have it stop. So I'm just going to share with you a few incidents. Maybe, I don't know, Katie, can you read one? And David, can you read the second one?
A customer began screaming at me for no reason while in line and correctly distanced at 6 feet. I am mostly Chinese and my family has been in San Luis Obispo since the 1860s. I am fourth generation San Luis Obispo, but I guess I will never be an American.
Waiting to cross the street, I felt something on my head and it turned out to be spit all over my hair and back of my coat. I was repeatedly spit on by a big white guy.
I was shopping and a child grabbed my arm. Child said I should go back to my country, and I was the reason his father died. Mother came up and put her hand on my arm, but she didn't try to help me. Bakersfield occasionally has ignorant people who make fun of how I talk and look and tell me to go home. But this is scariest and saddest experience I've had in the United States since about 1977.
My wife and I were taking a walk, minding our own business, when two dogs tried to attack us. When the woman owner came to us, she said, "The reason the dogs are afraid of you is because you eat dogs." Then said, "You need to go back from where you came from." We were shocked to hear this.
Thanks. So you could hear how people are treating and yelling at Asians of all ethnicities at this moment. We've received 3,800 of these cases of hate from all 50 states already, and that's just a fraction of what's happening throughout the country. 3 out of 5 Asians now say they experience this type direct racism themselves. So maybe you have, and I heard some of the stories where people yell at you or they blame us for bringing the coronavirus. And again, these are all elderly people. So people feel like they could attack even our seniors. There's stories where some grandparents are pushing a baby stroller and a car followed them for blocks and the driver was just yelling at them with slurs and profanities. And so I'm just sort of stunned that people could be so hateful and so angry and so fearful that they treat seniors and babies so poorly, so subhumanly. And then we've come to the recent violence. And I've realized that, I was talking about, the Chinese guy who got killed, the Thai guy who got killed, and I'm not really recognizing that these are real people with families, persons who could have been your grandparent or your brother or your mom. And so I just want to take a moment now to remember all these people who have passed away just recently. So if you'll join me, I'm going to say their names and we'll just take a moment of silence to remember that this violence, this racism isn't just being yelled out, but the hate has led to death. So we remember Pak Ho, a 75-year-old Chinese American who was robbed and killed in Oakland 2 weeks ago. For Juanito Falcon, who was punched and then died 2 days later in Arizona. We grieve for Vicha Ratnapakdi, an 84-year-old Thai American who was shoved to the ground and died. We mourn for Christian Hall, a 19-year-old who was shot 7 times by the police just last year. We commemorate Angelo Quinto, a 30-year-old Filipino American who was killed by the police in a chokehold like George Floyd last Christmas. And we mourn for those who were shot this week: Delana Yuan, Paul Andre Michel, Xiao Jie Tan, Dao Yo Feng. We grieve for Sung Chung Park, Yun Jung Grant, Sun Cha Kim, and Young Yue. Lord, we remember these individuals whose lives were lost. We grieve with their families, and we ask that your comfort, your presence be with them even in this darkest time. In Jesus' name, amen. So it's been really horrific for all of us in the Asian community, because if you see these faces, maybe you see yourself, your own family in it. And I don't know, maybe you probably heard about Bali Kung. And I think he's actually a model of grace, of how we can respond as Christians to this. You probably know this story better. Maybe some of you know this story better. He's from Texas, from a Chin family. He was shopping, and then a guy from behind grabbed a knife at Sam's Town and then slashed him and his 2 sons, a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. The assailant said he thought they were Chinese, and so he attacked them for bringing the coronavirus over. This happened, I don't know, last June. And since then, it's been half a year now. He still is hypervigilant that Bali is always looking around, really aware of his surroundings, and his son still can't sleep by himself. His son can't move his eyes anymore because he was slashed by the eye. And despite being attacked this way in a hate speech, Bali Kung says, God protected my family, and God sent Zach to protect my family right there at the right time. So Zach came and tackled the assailant. So even though Bali Kung could be really angry and bitter, and even though he's still really aware, he prays for his attacker all the time. And he says, I can forgive him, but we cannot accept racism or that kind of terrorist attack. So he's let go of his anger and forgiven him, but he still sees what happened was wrong, and he doesn't want it to happen to others. And he realized that it's not him to be blamed for our being Asian, but he says, they personally may have racism, but I don't care. I'm proud of being Asian and Asian American. So that even though he knows people hate him for being Asian, he's still proud about his Asianness. He's not going to deny who he is or try to fit in just because people may not accept you. So I want to hold out this motto of Bali Kung, and we're going to return to it as we talk about the racism Asian Americans have experienced and how we respond to it. What we're dealing with now, and what Bali Kung dealt with, is what we call the Yellow Peril. People were afraid that Asian people, yellow people, were dangerous, were a peril, and that we were a threat to the West. So you could see this picture that Asians would come and overcome Europe and America with their people, with their diseases, and take over and dominate. So this is sort of in the back of their minds. White people are really concerned about the threat of Asians. And so when diseases come from Asia, that yellow peril, that fear of Asians gets resurrected again and again. In the 19th century, I'm going to quickly go over Asian American history so you could see how this happens. In the 19th century, there were 3 diseases: malaria, smallpox, and leprosy, and they were seen to come from San Francisco Chinatown, bringing death. And so again, people were afraid of us. They were afraid that we were disease carriers. And because of that, they passed the law saying to exclude us, to exclude first Chinese and then all Asians. Not only did they pass laws against Asians because they feared us and our diseases, but they also attacked us with violence. In the 19th century, over 300 Chinese settlements were driven out. They were displaced. So my own family, we were living, my great-great-grandparents were living in Monterey, California by where the aquarium is now. They were evicted from their land, and when they wouldn't leave, a fire broke out and destroyed the entire village. The landlord wouldn't let them return. He fenced off the area. So even though my family had been living there for 40 years, they had to leave and move to San Francisco Chinatown for protection against the discrimination. So here you see the racism and the fear about Asian people and their diseases leads to these policies. That happened again when the bubonic plague came in 1900. The bubonic plague again led to thousands of deaths in Europe. And when health officials found that it was in Chinatown, they roped off Chinatown. They let white people out, but they kept the Chinese people in to get sick. And it's really unfair to the Asians. In Santa Ana and in Honolulu, they burned down the entire Chinatown, leaving all the Chinese people homeless and actually spreading the rats who had the disease. So you see, we have eerie parallels to today. A disease comes from Asia, Asians get attacked, they have policies to exclude or quarantine them. And today we see the same thing happening. We have thousands of attacks, we're getting shot, we're getting pushed and shoved, and we had policies directed against us. Time and time again, if you're Asian, and if the US is at war with Asia, or if the US is in competition with Asia economically, then Asians in America bear the brunt of it. We feel the effects. So when the US was at war with Japan, Japanese Americans were seen as disloyal traitors, and they were put into concentration camps, 120,000 people put behind barbed wire. Similarly, after 9/11, America declares war on terrorism. And what happens is that those who look like stereotypical terrorists get attacked. These are 6 people who are shot and killed in Wisconsin for simply looking like a stereotypical Muslim terrorist. These people are from India and are Sikh, but just because they had turbans and beards, that's what other Americans think are dangerous terrorists. And so again, war comes to America and Americans attack those who they think are the enemy. So this is what's happening in America. You have a lot of white, black people. And so most people think race relations is a white-black issue. And people tend to want whiteness because whites have wealth, power, status. Even what we consider attractive is white. And to get whiteness, we avoid blackness. And so a lot of people look down on black people because they don't have the same power, prestige, and status. Asians who come here also want whiteness because we don't want to be white people, but we want power, we want status, we want to fit in. And there's a big pressure to assimilate, to become insiders, to fit in so that we can have the good things about the United States. The danger, though, is as we try to fit in and become insiders to America, to want to belong, to want to be at home, we lose our language, we change how we say our names, we change the way we dress, we change what we eat, we learn to do well in school, all to gain the power and the wealth of whiteness. So that's when the young people said, that's the model minority. People think we're smart and hardworking as we try to gain all these things. But sometimes what's happening now is that we're seen as outsiders. Instead of insiders, we're still outsiders. We're still continued to be seen as a yellow peril, as perpetual foreigners. So again, because we're seen as outsiders who don't belong to America, that's why people feel free to spit and cough on us. That's why people feel free to push and shove our elders, because we don't belong. They're trying to shove us back out. That's why people are actually shooting at us now, because they think we brought the disease, or we're, again, threats to their purity. So those of us who are immigrants understand what it means to be a foreigner. You feel unwelcome and excluded. Sometimes you feel inferior because you don't fit in with the rest of the group. You may not speak English as well. You may not dress the way other people do. And then you feel ashamed for being different. I know a lot of Asians try to fit in. They want to be belong to the group. But if we're always excluded, we feel shame just for our foods, for the way we speak. And so as a result, because a lot of us are immigrants, we never really feel at home or at ease in this country. And I think I heard that from your discussion groups. People experience what we call aggressions. When people bully you, or they think they're impatient with you because of your accent, or they think you're not as smart because you don't speak English as well. And so that's the issue that a lot of immigrants face. And it's really difficult for individuals to be newcomers to the country. And you guys understand that, I think. But the impact of the perpetual foreigner also results in systematic discrimination. It results in how institutions like government treat us, how government creates policies, official policies that sees us as foreigners to be excluded, never belonging. And we've seen that last year. There was the travel ban of Burma, and so people couldn't travel from Burma to the US because they were part of other Muslim/terrorist nations. I know some people had bought airplane tickets, were planning to come, got visas, but then couldn't come after they spent all their money and couldn't reunite with their family because of this travel ban. The president last year also cut off migration visas, so you couldn't reunify with your families. He cut refugee resettlement. So I don't know if you came as refugees, we used to receive 100,000 a year. Trump cut it down to 15,000. He cut H-1B visas, and again, those are mostly Asians. And he cut public benefits so that if you applied for, let's say, Medi-Cal, you wouldn't be able to get a green card. You wouldn't be able to get permanent residency, possibly. So because we were perceived as dangerous outsiders, again, we had a second Exclusion Act. All these policies directly hurt Asians more proportionally. And then the young people also talked about the model minority problem. So Asian Americans, we're not white or black, and we don't face the same issues of black people, but we're more insiders or outsiders. Sometimes we fit in, but sometimes we're outside. But even being fit in as a model minority gives us problems, like the young people said. So people think we're quiet and hardworking, that we do well in school. But because we're the model minority, teachers often overlook us. They don't pay attention to us, or they don't think we have problems. They don't think we face racism. And instead, as the model minority, others compare Blacks to us, to Asians, and say, oh, why can't you be like Asians? And so then Blacks and Latinos are more resentful and jealous towards Asians, who are supposed to be the good minority as compared to being the bad minority. So this stereotype hurts other groups, and it hurts us as well, because for the young people, they feel like, oh, we're supposed to be really smart. We're supposed to do well in school, but they're always trying to match up to a level that they can't attain. And if they do have problems, people don't recognize them because they say, oh, they're just quiet. I'm sure they're doing fine. And they don't pay attention to maybe the learning issues, the mental health issues that we're experiencing. At the workplace too, because of this stereotype that we're quiet, others don't see us as good leaders. So we don't get promoted to management. We don't get opportunities that others have. They just say, oh, they're good workers, but they're not good as management. So to wrap up, Asians right now are really in a state of siege. I know a lot of people are really afraid to go out because they're afraid of getting attacked because of racism. I know all my students are telling their parents and elderly grandparents, don't go out because you might get pushed and shoved. And so we're feeling threatened. And when you feel threatened, people, like animals, go into these automatic responses. You get attacked, some people fight back. And that's how some Asians are. They want to buy guns. They want more police to fight back against the racists and the criminals. Others go into flight mode. They run away and they avoid the problem. They say, don't go out. They don't let their kids go back to school. Others freeze. They just stop and they don't think about the hard things. It's too hard to remember that people don't like you, that people aren't accepting you. And so even if you get spit on, you just sort of dismiss and say, that doesn't matter. And you don't realize how hateful and mean it is because you just try to deny what's happening, and you try to disassociate from what's happening. But there's a fourth response that animals do and that I think people do, and I think that Asians do really well in responding to threats of racism, threats of danger, threats of attack, and that's to flock. I see Asians now really coming together like you are today and finding strength in your group, finding comfort in being together, finding safety being among other people from Burma, other Asians. And so I think this flocking approach is the way we respond to racism. Right now, the community is under attack, and I think in Asian communities, people are flocking to Chinatowns and other neighborhoods to protect our elders. If you go to San Francisco or Oakland Chinatown, a lot of people are coming out to help our businesses and to support our elderly, to watch out for them. And so this flocking mechanism of going to church and then talking about these issues is actually God's way of taking care of us and protecting us from danger. I want to sort of share how Jeremy Lin, a basketball player, has responded to the racism, and it's really similar to the way Bali Kung did. So he's a basketball player, really famous, but because he's Asian, when he's playing basketball, people have called him the coronavirus. They blamed him for being the disease. And he could get angry, and he has gotten angry, and he is mad and upset about it. But his response, like Bali Kung's, is initially getting over the anger, is that he thought about it and said, he became sad about the perpetrator, thinking, instead of wanting to get back, he just empathized with the perpetrator and said, it's really sad that society has produced people who call other people names. It's sad that because of sin, people shoot and attack people that they think are causing them problems. And so he went from anger to sadness about the society that's so racist. And then, like Bali Kung, he forgave them and wants to reconcile with the racist. He wants to restore relationships. And I think that's what God's calling us to do today, is to, when we're confronted with being attacked, it's okay to be angry, because I think that's a national response. But what we can do with that anger or with that fear is to flock together, come together for strength, forgive the perpetrator the way Jesus has forgiven us, and then seek to reconcile with them the way Jesus has reconciled with us. So I'd just like to thank you for being my flock today. I know I'm continually to be grieving and sad over the racism Asians have experienced. I hear what's happening in Burma today and Myanmar, and I hear how in schools, I know the Korean kids I talk to struggle with mistreatment, but I'm glad that they have churches like yours where they can flock together, find God's protection, and then also share God's forgiveness. So thanks a lot, and thanks for inviting me.
I want to thank Russell for joining us.